Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lei'd Back Life podcast, where we talk about how to love life, entrepreneurship, and improve daily. Joining me today, Darren Wurz. Darren, how are you?
I'm hanging in there today, but it's great to be with you, Jordan.
Good. I'm glad to have you. So
Yeah.
it's interesting, we've been through, I don't know, I want to say 20 something episodes, but I could be way off in maybe it's more. And we sort of break these down into a couple buckets where we've got people coming to share their story. We've got people coming to talk about like the technology of a great life, the future of a great life. And then like this other bucket has become the money of a great life. So Darren's a multi-hyphenate who covers a number of those boxes. He's a certified financial planner and a certified exit planning advisor, as well as the author of The Lawyer Millionaire, the complete guide for attorneys on maximizing wealth, minimizing taxes, and retiring with confidence. But also you have lived a lot of this stuff. Like you are walking the walk that you are telling other people to do. And so like I'm really interested to hear not just the, financial stuff and the living a great life as you go through having a business, but also to hear, more about your specific journey.
Well, it's why we built the program that we built, because we realized that traditional financial advice doesn't really fit law firm owners, or a lot of business owners, to be quite honest, because most financial advice is very focused on retirement, right? You're going to retire at a certain age. Yeah, but that's very old school because, back in the days when people had pensions, right? You're going to retire at 65, go collect your pension and your gold watch and, and live out the glory days, right? But law firm owners are not wired that way. Your identity is very tied to what you do, both as a lawyer and as a business owner. And in many ways, you enjoy what you do. It's a very difficult transition to go from running a busy law practice to doing something completely different. So, most law firm owners that we speak with and work with, they don't have traditional notions of retirement. They don't want to really ever retire necessarily, but they want to achieve something that I like to call work optionality. They want to be work optional. So they want to reach a place financially where they have streams of income supporting themselves so that they don't have to depend solely on the business. And that provides a level of comfort and a level of confidence where I can choose the clients I want to work with. I can choose when I want to work. I can choose how hard I want to work. I don't have to be the highest paid person in my firm. I can run the firm, and I can still do other things in life that I enjoy at the same time.
So where where does somebody start with this? Like, is work optionality a day one thing?
Hmm. Well, it starts by, there's two components really. There's the business side of things, and then there's the personal financial side of things, right? So, you've got to get your business in a place where it's going to support that. Um, if you're a solo and you don't have any employees, you're not ready yet, right? You need to have a system. You're going to need to have some employees. You're going to need to be able to delegate some things that's going to free up your time. So in the business, there's some things you need to do to, free up yourself and free up your time from the business. And then on the personal side of things, we need to
Wait, hold
plan.
on. Before you go to that side, because
Yeah,
like, I mean, that's a lot of the coaching that I do, right? Like getting them out of the
absolutely.
nitty-gritty stuff. Are there common systems, common roles, common things you see people needing to delegate first?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, universally, it's the executive assistant is number one, right? Um, having a strong executive assistant is so powerful. When I first hired my executive assistant, I was hesitant. I started her at like 5 hours a week. I was like, I don't really know what you're going to be able to do for me. I mean, I ramped her up to as many hours as I could, as she could give me very soon because I was like, wow, this is incredible. Being able to have something that I can just say, hey, can you please take care of this? Right? And me not having to deal with it. That's step number one. Getting those low level tasks off of your plate. A lot of law firm owners want to start with hiring the attorney. And I'm like, no, attorneys are expensive. Hire the EA and offload the low value tasks so you can focus on the high value tasks. Do that first.
Okay, so in the It's a Small World After All weirdness,
Yeah.
literally the newsletter I was writing before we got on this was about the benefit of having an EA. So
Yeah.
we're gonna swap it and run that as the newsletter that comes. This will come out on Tuesday. The newsletter that comes out on Friday will be my like 7 tips on having an EA because it goes right
Beautiful.
into. I agree with you so much that I literally just wrote this. It is hysterical.
Yeah. Well, and I'm a big fan of um, what's his name? Buy Back Your Time, Dan
Dan
Martell.
Martell.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of his ladder approach of kind of offloading. Now, I kind of see it a little bit differently. I think you can offload a lot of the marketing tasks up front. I think he has marketing higher up on the ladder. But I love that concept. Get the admin out of the way. Then after the admin is fully delegated, then you can start focusing on delegating the client delivery. And that's where you're bringing on attorneys, really paralegals first, because they're not as expensive. They can do a lot of the client delivery. And then attorneys are last, right? Yes, attorneys will pay for themselves because they can bill hours, but at the same time, you are the business owner, you're gonna have to come up with their salary. So you want to maximize your profitability first and foremost before you have to bring on an attorney and pay that attorney salary.
I agree. Also, shout out to I don't know when Brett's episode come came out. It would have been a couple weeks before this, but like Brett wrote a book, 24 Months to Freedom, and specifically
Yeah.
outlines like through Get Staffed Up the 7 different roles in like a very similar order to you're talking about. So
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
cool. All right. So now like we talked, I don't want to go too detailed into the business
Yeah.
side of it. There's
Sure.
plenty of things to watch. I can send you more stuff. Darren's got stuff. We've got books we can send you, whatever. Talk to me now. Now flip to me about the personal finances side of work optionality.
Yeah, there's really two components. There's the personal and there's the personal financial. So, let's talk about the personal first, because it's so easy to get so embedded in your business, right? You eat, sleep, drink your business. You're thinking about it when you go to bed at night. You're thinking about it when you wake up in the morning. And so many people forget to have hobbies. I don't have time to have a hobby. I'm too busy, right? But you need to like just take a step back and think what makes you happy. And if you're listening to this episode right now, I want you to ask yourself, right? Ask yourself, are you happy? Be honest with yourself. Are you really, really happy right now? And like maybe look back over the span of your life, right? And find a time when you were really happy and think about how that compares to now, right? So, I mean, the ironic thing is, we get so busy in our businesses, but we don't find happiness there. We find overwhelm there. We find stress and anxiety there. Um, and we think absurdly that if I just work harder, I can get to the place
Yeah. Come on, Darren. If I have no free time, I can't be
where I
miserable.
can
I don't have time
have.
to think about being miserable.
It's a lie. It's a damn lie.
Well, so this might have been my therapist. It was somebody smarter than I told me everyone is either trying to go back to high school or run as far away from high school as possible.
Yes.
So from that
Yes.
happy thing, it might be like either being the star quarterback or not getting stuffed in a locker. One,
Or,
like
like think about when you were like in law school or fresh out of college and you were eating ramen for dinner and barely making any money. Yeah, you didn't have much money, but there was a sense of like adventure, right, at that time in your life, right? So like we need to revive that sense of adventure and not get so. I tell you what, a lot of it is the things in our lives. Our lives expand, and for no reason. We expand, we buy a bigger house, we buy a more expensive car, and all of these things become traps that just entrap us and enslave us, and they become sources of anxiety. Um,
Parkinson's law, right? Like work expands to fill the time allotted. Your expenses expand to fill the finances allotted. You need
yes.
that outside force.
So, really defining what makes you happy in life, I think, is step number one, right? Really getting clear on that. Who are the people? What are the things, the activities that you like to do? What's going to really make you happy? I mean, if you sold your house and bought a camper and lived as a, what do they call it, a digital nomad, you could be pretty happy, right? So it's not the things, right? It's not the things that we have in life. Um,
I
so
give you my super secret, most amazing pro tip.
yeah,
There's going to be people listening to this who are like, I have nothing fun anymore. The law has
yeah.
taken anything out of me. So here's my suggestion. Go watch the movie Soul. It's a Pixar movie about jazz. It involves talking cats, but like part of it is what gives a soul a spark. And they kind of go through,
Mhm.
there's like hundreds, they're walking down this hallway of interests. And just like watch the movie and see, anything in that hall of interest that becomes something you might want to try. Like here's a list of potential hobbies, potential interests, potential things.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And so we actually do this with clients. We take a deep dive into an exercise we call dreams, goals, vision, helping them really think critically. If we're going to plan out the next 20, 30 years, right? We need to really know what's going to make you happy. You got to really dig deep. Because it's not the common things, right? A lot of times when I'm talking about, future planning with folks, they say the things everybody says, like travel or, things like that. I mean, let's think about travel, right? Travel really that fun? Let's be honest here.
Yes.
You cram yourself into this tiny
Oh,
little airplane, there are aspects of travel that are not so much fun. And I kind of came to this realization. I was like, travel is fun, travel's cool, but I don't like it as much as I think I like. I think I like it because I think I'm supposed to like it. You know what I
interesting.
mean? So really,
That's how I feel about golf. Top golf, I love. Real golf, I feel like you feel about travel.
right. So let's get really critical and dive into our why. So, thinking about your personal mission, right? Maybe you have gone through an exercise of creating a mission statement or a purpose statement for your business. I just last year I read Simon Sinek's book, Start with Why.
Yeah.
So great, so great. And yes, that's great for the business, but then, once you've achieved a certain level of success in your business, what's next? Start thinking about the why for you. And this is what every very successful entrepreneur has done, like Bill Gates. You can see how Bill Gates lives his why in starting Microsoft was to put a computer in every home, right? To make computers accessible to everyone. With the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he's living the same why, which is accessibility, you know, uh, um, providing
Curing
equity,
malaria and
curing
solving all,
diseases.
yeah.
Yeah, right. It's that accessibility and that charitable mission that he is extending. It's the same concept. He's just now carried that over into a broader, bigger personal mission, right? And you've got to have that. You've got to have that if you're going to find, um, fulfillment outside of just the humdrum of working. So there's really a lot of deep personal work that needs to happen.
See, I would push back on one thing you said. You talked about like having it for the business and then at a point building it for yourself. I actually
Mhm.
think it's the opposite. I think if you figure
Yeah.
out yourself and like, and this is kind of the issue I have with start with why is, well, I guess it's not so much about finding your why, right? Like start with why is about how you get your why out there in a way that matters. I think the issue is so many people don't know how to find that reasoning for themselves to then use it as the business thing.
Yeah.
Whereas it's easier for us to create, what are our aspirational core values and employees? Great. Now we have a mission
hmm
statement for the company.
I love that. No, I think you're right. You do start personally first and build the business on that. Yeah. Why not? I mean, you are the business owner, build the business around yourself and your core values should reflect who you are, right? What's unique about you?
Yeah. Well, and I think like, what can let's go through the benefits to somebody listening to this who's a business owner
Yeah.
of doing this.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, happiness. Happiness. We have one life to live, Jordan, right? Let's maximize our happiness.
Yeah.
Let's have joy in our lives. And, so many people work so hard and they wait so long to start living. By the time they are ready to really experience life, they're 65 and it's too late, right? So let's build a life that gives you optionality today, right? And gives you freedom and flexibility now. I like a lot of the concepts that come from the FIRE movement, right? Let's live a little bit more simply and more sustainably, right? And there's a different idea of retirement. If you're a business owner, you can continue working, right? It's not, you don't have to be in a rush. You don't have to be in a rush. You can just take a breath, right?
But I think that's the point of the happiness you're talking about. Like if
Yeah.
you're miserable, you are counting down the seconds on that clock, whether it's for the day, the week, or your entire career. If you're
Yeah.
genuinely enjoying the journey, you're like, all right, hey, when I retire, I'll only take 10 cases a month instead of 20. I'll only take 5 I'll
Yeah.
only coach, people 1 day a week instead of 3 days a week. Like when you genuinely enjoy it, it's easier to stay in the game.
Right. Right. And make sure that you are continuing to enjoy it, right? Because it can be easy to get burned out to the point where you're not enjoying it anymore.
I
Right.
also, it's always wild to me as a business owner, like having hobbies makes you a ton of money. Like
Mm.
my wife is has done a bunch of like adult kickball leagues and stuff like that, and then those
Yep.
become people that hire us when they get in a car accidents. I play golf and pickle or play top golf, to be honest, to my earlier statement, and
Yeah.
pickleball with referral sources and other lawyers and doctors, and like it's just wild to me the relationship building, the referrals that come from having fun things to do.
Absolutely. My brother Travis built a drag racing car and he takes it around to these racetracks and does these races and he does motorcycles. I didn't get that gene, I guess. I don't know, but but in doing so, he's met some really, really fantastic potential clients who are, just out at the track with their vehicles and you make these relationships. In business, it's all about who you know, and it's your network. And in a world that is increasingly so competitive online and everything else, that personal interaction where you can tie in your life and the things you enjoy doing with your ability to build your network, that can be really, really powerful. And I think people are really looking for that in today's world.
I just want to echo that, the who you know, because like it's never been easier to be connected to people in a way where you don't know them and they don't know you. So
Oh,
like,
sure.
please understand, Darren and I are not saying like, oh, you are friends with them on LinkedIn. This is no, like they would answer your phone if you called. They would make an email intro for you. They would think
Yeah.
of you when a potential case came up. Like it's who you know. It's not just this weird numbers game of how many business cards you have in your Rolodex.
Right, right. And it's surprising how those relationships grow and expand over time in ways that you could never imagine. Um, yeah, it's like one person introduces you to the next, and then the next, and then the next, and just your network continues to spider web out.
I mean, dude, like us playing ping pong in Chicago,
Right,
through
right.
a connection from Steve Fretzen or Chelsea Williams or Jaden Doye. Like it's if you are an enjoyable person and not a
Mm,
terrible human being, and you spend enough time with people with connections in an industry, in a community, in a group, in a whatever, like you will connect with people
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah,
it's enjoyable.
it was a big fear of mine because our business was very much a community-based business in Cincinnati, Ohio for many years. And then COVID happened, and I decided to, kind of expand my geography, right? But I was like, well, how, right? How am I going to build a network that's digital and not location dependent, right? But the same things, you build relationships with people, you get on Zoom, you get to know people, and you try to meet with people in person as much as possible, by going to events and things like that to really solidify those connections. But it's all doable, you
But if
know.
you hate travel, then
Well,
you've
yes.
got you've got a podcast, you've got the Zoom, you've got whatever.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well, that's the personal side of things, but then there's the personal financial. You want to go there?
Yeah. Is
Yeah.
there anything else we want to talk about from the personal side before we jump into the finances?
Yeah, no, I think that's a good framework. I mean, really redefining your why, knowing what makes you happy. Those are really good places to start. Thinking about maybe even having a personal mission statement for yourself. That's something that we do with our clients. We help them develop that for their lives. And then how do we orient all the money around that personal mission statement? It becomes the filter. It becomes the filter through which we can decide if something's worth pursuing or not. Does this align with my personal mission? If not, it's a no, right?
So I always tell people write your obituary. There's
Yeah.
this crazy, I mean, like Alfred Nobel of the Nobel Peace Prize. Before that, invented dynamite. His brother died. They ran his obituary as like the merchant of death, and everybody who died from
Oh,
dynamite and
wow.
getting blown up. And he was like, I don't want to be remembered that way. So he put together what becomes the Nobel Peace Prize in an effort to change it. And I was like, if it worked for him, it works for, a schmuck like me to just write an obituary. And then like it's always wild to me, you mentioned the things that align, like the things that aren't in there.
Hmm.
If you don't have a law firm owner of this 40-year law firm with blah 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 in your obituary, like it's not that important to you. I'm not
Yes.
saying, to skip it, but like if it's a means to an end, focus on the end. If it's in your obituary as a huge part of who you are, then great, embrace that in terms of having this enjoyable journey.
Yes. And there's just one thing that we have to realize and have to remind ourselves of is you can't take any of it with you. You can't take any of the money with you. What are the things, I don't know what your anybody's spiritual beliefs are, right? But I just feel like there's an eternal aspect of people and human relationships. And those are the things, I think as you get older, those are the things that you really start to value is that the people that are around you and the family members and really those connections. Um,
Well, but that's what makes me tear up when I hear of these business owners like, I'm just gonna roll up my sleeves and not see my kids for the next 3 to 5 years, and then we'll do this. And I'm like,
might
but
not be around.
well, it might not be. And then like, what's their story like? Like you can make the decision. They can't of like, I didn't
Mhm.
get to see one parent for my entire childhood or whatever it was. It's a wild concept to think that's the right decision and then with time realize it's not and
Yeah.
not be able to undo it.
Yeah, no one there's a study or a story about this, deathbed confessions, and no one ever said that they wished they had made more money
Oh
on their
yeah.
deathbed.
So Bronnie Ware wrote this. She was a nurse in like a hospice, especially for
Uh-huh.
men. Number one, I wish I didn't spend as much time in the office. That is the number one deathbed confession of men.
Yeah.
Was then, I'm sure it still is today. Hustle and grind culture waits for nobody.
Hmm.
Yeah, and nobody is saying, man, I was really pissed off. I spent so much time with my family and friends.
But it's so easy to get swept up in the growth and work and grind. It's just easy to do.
But how do we change that mindset, perspective,
Mm,
worldview? I don't like that's why like I
yeah.
always push the money thing. I always push the referral source thing because I think most people like, well, I'm doing this because of money. And I'm like, but actually you're shooting yourself in the foot.
Yeah.
So hang out with cool people and like opportunities arise and money happens and cases get passed and people introduce each other to employees and that's why I always try to push that stuff, but I don't know what the other sticking points are.
Play the long game. Yeah, I think so many times we're in a hurry, and we feel like if I don't get this next client this quarter, everything's going to fall apart, right? But it's not. You're going to be fine. You're playing the long game. You got to remember that. Success doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and I don't have the magic formula for it. I think a big part of it is finding time and space to force yourself to disconnect. I find this is true for myself. It's very, very hard to disconnect. But if I actually physically remove myself from my environment and I force myself into a vacation space where I don't have access to internet and things like that, the first day is tough, But then after that, I kind of shift into this, like day two, I'll shift into a relaxation mode. And I'm not thinking
Interesting.
about the business. And then I find it's difficult to get back into really focusing on and thinking about the business because I have been able to shift into that mode of, oh, who cares? You know.
See, my thing is wearing pants. If I don't have to wear pants, nothing can really be that serious.
Okay, okay.
So
You gotta
like
find
that's
what
the
it is for
mindset.
you. Yeah.
Yeah, if you see me in pants, like the shit's going down. Seriously. Like there is something has happened. We're going to a funeral or a multi-million dollar case or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But it is that mindset. I mean, I guess it's that pant set in this case, but like
Hmm.
it's the outfit or it's the cell phone or it's the location. Like we have these habits we get into. And I
Hmm.
think the vacation, breaks that habit. It breaks I think the average person picks up their phone like 70 something times a day. It's something crazy. Checks their phone,
Hmm.
crazy
Hmm.
amount, which if you have an iPhone, you can actually see that in your settings. The
Yes,
average
that's
times that
scary.
yeah, it's terrifying.
The amount of time you spent on TikTok.
Right. The time
Yeah,
suck stuff. So in terms of though, like let's get a little not hard on finances because everybody's financials are going to be
yeah.
different. But like I don't, the story, the Joseph Heller, Kurt Vonnegut story.
I don't think so.
Okay, so they're at this hedge fund guy's party, and
Oh
Vonnegut
yeah, yeah.
goes
But
to
tell the
Kurt
story.
Heller.
Yeah.
And he goes, "How do you feel knowing that this guy makes more money in an hour than you will make selling Catch 22 for its entire run?" And Heller
Hmm.
goes, "Well, I know something that he doesn't." And Vonnegut goes, "What's that?" And Heller goes, "The definition of enough." And
Yeah.
I just like one, I want to be at this party. Like I can only imagine the conversation between those two guys. But
Right.
also like it's such a great point.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. So that I've came across that story in The Psychology of Money by Morgan
Yes. Yeah,
Housel.
yeah, yeah.
And we read that last quarter in our book club, actually. Yeah, it's such a great point. Getting the goalposts to stop moving, understanding what level of financial success you're basically happy and content, right? And it's so easy to want to chase more. But when you're constantly chasing more, you never get there. If you're constantly thinking to yourself, if I just get to this revenue level, if I just get to this get to X or Y or Z, then I'll be happy. It will never happen,
Darren,
right?
you're in my brain. That was my post this morning.
Well, I think it's human, it's very common, for us as human beings to think that way. And I see it around financial success as well. If I just can get to here, then I'll be okay, or then I'll
Yeah.
start saving. The problem is you don't, right? Because I see people that make $700,000 a year and can't save a dime.
Sure.
And I'm
That are
like,
that are negative, that are cash flow negative.
right? So it all and then on the other hand, I have clients who never made more than $100,000 a year who retire millionaires.
Right. The teachers become one of the most common one. Teachers, engineers,
Yeah.
whatever. So, okay, here's my question. If you haven't answered this question, my mind will be blown because as of yet, I can't, no one has had, we
Okay.
have this concept where we're like, hey, I'm going to sacrifice spending that time with my family. I'm going to sacrifice the time with friends so I can work more. But nobody ever is like, but hey, I'm gonna sacrifice that $5 that doesn't matter to me and instead go hang out with my friends and family. Like, I don't understand why we always talk about rationalizing the sacrifice in the money direction, but then, like, I totally agree with you. We can't take it with us. Like, there's an amount of money that we don't need. So we never have the conversation about are we sacrificing life for money?
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to understand it here.
Well, it's so often we get the people
Mhm.
that say, like, hey, I just I have to stay late at the office. I have to sacrifice the going to my kid's sporting event. I have to, bill those next 3 hours, finish this case, whatever. We never do the like, hey, I'm going to sacrifice doing this extra work that doesn't matter and doesn't have to be done at 6 o'clock at night to do the family stuff,
Mm.
knowing that like there's an amount of money I no longer need. I don't know that there's an amount of positive memories with my friends and family that I would ever not want more of.
Yes. Here's the thing about money. There always be more money. You can get more money. You can never get more time,
Yeah.
right? Time is not an infinite resource. Money is an infinite resource. You can get more money, but time runs out. We haven't figured out how to not make time run out yet. So it's a great point, Jordan. We have to enjoy the time we have. We've got to maximize it. And a lot of times people will ask me, about working with me, what's the return on investment, that I'm going to get? And I'm like, you know what? There's a great return on investment, but it's not about that. It's really about the return on life. Because when you really know, when you've aligned your life and you've really critically thought about what's important to you and you've created and designed a life that makes you happy, there's no price. There's no dollar amount that I can assign to that. When you know that you're on track, when you have the confidence in being financially secure, I can't put a price tag on that, right? When you have the time freedom to spend time with your family, how do you value that?
What and look, I'm gonna say what is that number? I don't mean like $7.2 million, but
Yeah.
like in terms of that flexibility, like how do we figure out how do we come up with the enough, the Joseph Heller enough?
It really revolves around your lifestyle. I mean, that's step number one. What is the lifestyle you want to have? What's the lifestyle you can be comfortable at? Because, hey, you could retire on very little if you adjust your lifestyle to a certain point. So it's that balance, you know what I mean? And not everybody has the courage necessarily it takes courage. It takes courage to not expand your lifestyle, right? To say, I'm happy here and everything else on top is gravy. It's so much, like, there's so many influences around us that get us to continually expand our
Yeah, all of
lifestyle.
marketing,
All of marketing, yes.
the
Inflation,
30,000 marketing
yeah.
pieces of marketing that we get every day.
So that's the trick. That's the biggest trick. Get the goalpost to stop moving. Define your enough. Define the level at which you're happy. And there is a lot of science on this. Income moves the needle in happiness only to a point. And then
Yeah.
beyond that point, it doesn't make that big of a difference.
Do you know what? So when they first did the study, I think it was $67,000. I don't
Yeah,
know what that is now.
I'm not sure. I'm not
Okay.
sure.
Well, we could adjust inflation adjust it or whatever. But like it was so interesting because I don't know if it was in that study or a book that talked about it. They like tell you about, that family that scrimped and saved all week so that Friday night they can go to McDonald's and everybody can order their favorite value meal and that being such a wonderful moment for this family that like it was something to look forward to. Whereas, I think for you and I, like a $10, $12 meal at McDonald's is not a coming together moment, but like the opportunity for that to be so rewarding, so enjoyable based upon lower finances was a really interesting concept.
Yeah, yeah. You can have happiness and you don't have to have all the trappings, and it's very tricky. The world wants us to expand. The government wants us to spend more money.
Yeah. Well, it's like so I'm looking at houses right now and I'm just
Yeah,
like too big, too big. I don't want a 4,000 square foot house because I don't want to have to clean or pay to have cleaned and
yeah,
air conditioned and whatever else like. But there's
yeah.
people out there that are like, oh, I need the 30,000 square foot mansion or whatever.
Right. But here's, it's like things become traps for us.
Yeah.
They become anchors for us. I mean, you could buy a huge house and have it and enjoy it, but then that becomes a source of entrapment for, of like of form of slavery for you almost because it's going to pull you down, right? There'll be property tax, there's going to be things you got to fix, there's going to be all kinds of crap that goes wrong.
Well, or like, I mean, I think it's worse with cars. It
Yes.
amazes me, like, oh, buy and to Dan Martell, we were talking about him earlier from Buy Back Your Time, had this whole like buy a supercar, it'll get you
Hmm.
in the groups with all these other supercar people. And I'm sitting here like,
Yeah.
but I don't want a $1,200 oil change. I don't want a 27 week, I need to order a new part and it has to be custom made by Giuseppe in Italy somewhere and, shipped over under lock and key.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, as you get older, you realize that it's the simple things in life that give you the most happiness and most joy. Um, cars are interesting. I don't know. Cars don't move the needle for me
Yeah.
because I'm just like, okay, it's fiberglass and a bunch of parts that were put together, right? It just like it doesn't move the needle for me. I have really struggled with that.
Well, but I think to each their own, right? Like I'm with you on
Yeah.
the car thing, but if somebody else, if it's super important, okay, then sacrifice the third custom suit to have the nicer car if that, if the difference in price brings you that much joy.
Right. And hey, if that's what your hobby is and your happiness is, great. You
Right.
know what I mean? But don't chase those things necessarily because you think you have to. Um, but that could be where maybe you bring in your personal pursuits with your business, right? Maybe you have a certain hobby. Maybe that hobby is exotic cars, right? And that's going to get you into places and unlock doors for you. Great. You know what I mean?
Well, but I think really this goes back to the nobody actually cares what anything costs. They care
Mm,
about the value they'll get from it, right? So if I can rationalize the Topgolf membership as the best networking everywhere, it doesn't matter what they charge. If you can
mm.
rationalize the car as being financially worth it and enjoying worth it and showing and scaring opposing counsel to offering you more money, whatever else, like then go for it. If you find that to not be the case, then try to undo it. Don't be pot committed for the rest of your life to a bunch of things that don't serve you.
Do you think that can be a trap?
What?
I think that can be a trap,
The
right?
rationalization?
Potentially.
Oh,
Because
of
like,
course. We
yeah,
we
I
we
mean,
create our own issues, right? Like we are all in our own
I
limitations.
see a lot of business owners doing this, right? We're spending money on things like, oh, but it's going to help the business.
Right. But Darren, if it gets you one case, it pays for
If it
itself.
get, exactly.
You just need one case, one client.
Right. It's just
Yeah.
one client. No big deal, right? Yeah. Yeah, that can be tricky. It can be really tricky.
But that's why, like, like you talked about the personal core values, I talked about the obituary. Like, there are so many things in life that are not going to be in those things, right? Like, am I going to worry about what clothing I wore to this one day on my deathbed? No. So it doesn't really matter. Like, I'm not showing up naked, but I'm not stressing out about, like, oh my God, I spilled soy sauce on my Hawaiian shirt, and now what's the next person in the Zoom meeting going to think?
Yeah, yeah. Let me just caveat on this, right? It's really
Sure.
interesting what people wear,
Okay.
right? Um, I never liked wearing a suit and tie when I first came into the business. I wore suits, but with a shirt, and I wouldn't wear a tie, right? Um, I went to a networking event in Santa Monica with the Santa Monica Bar Association, and there were a bunch of attorneys there, and everybody was dressed very nicely. And I had a blazer on and my lawyer millionaire T-shirt, of course. And it was a great time. Then there was a back room, right? And I walk into the back room, and one of the attorneys says to me, "Oh, I don't know if you can be in here. These are the billionaires." And there were some really, really wealthy people hanging out in the back room. And you know what? None of them were dressed up. They were in t-shirts and jeans.
Yeah, well, that's
No,
why like whenever they do like the tech bros, right? And they're all wearing like it's like a $500 V-neck t-shirt that looks like a $5 Walmart shirt, but apparently they know
right.
what, brand it is versus like the people that want to look rich that just slather every logo over
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, so it's not about that necessarily. It's the labels and the appearance. You gotta figure out where the real happiness is for you, right? And the flashiness doesn't necessarily do it. Does that really move the needle for you? Does it really make you happy? If so, great. But really think about what really truly makes you happy at the end of the day.
And I think it's like believe that you are worthy of being happy. I
Hmm.
think that's the hurdle for a lot of at least my clients. Like there's a ton of lawyers that are selfish jerks, but I always feel like my clients are so selfless that they're just like ground down. And
Hmm.
the minute we turn up the selfishness, the minute we do get to prior, the minute we get to book that, weekly or monthly massage, the minute we get that self-care, the time for hobbies, like so many other things click in place.
Yeah, yeah. So, and then orient your finances around supporting that lifestyle, right? That's why we have to start with the personal first, because it's not necessarily about getting more money, about growing to a certain amount of money. It's about figuring out what's the level of success I need to reach that's going to support my happiness, right? That's critical. So, you don't necessarily need a $10 million portfolio. You
Right.
need the portfolio that fits you, that's going to support you and your happiness, right? And so often I think we trap ourselves because we think that my happiness is up here. I need to have this, I need to have that. And then we're working so hard to try to get to a certain place, we we're unhappy, right? We're just like spinning our tires, right? Where maybe you'd actually be just fine right here, a little bit less, a little bit more simple. You'd be really happy and you could build a life and build a financial plan that supports that level really, really easily. Um, yeah, so the personal comes first, and then we need to design the life and the financial plan that supports that.
Well, so it's interesting. The way you phrase that makes me think about Colin O'Brady. So he's like the first person to walk across Antarctica by himself. Like he pushed the sled with food and stuff.
Mm,
But he has this thing where he's like, being at the top of Mount Everest isn't as cool as knowing that you got yourself to the top of Everest, right? So having those like one days, having those awful days, having those real struggles makes you enjoy the other things better,
yeah,
versus this weird like let's constantly live life at a five or a six. Like have a couple ones to get the tens, but make sure you have a plan to get to those, 9 and 10 days.
yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Um, So we work with clients, we're helping them figure out how do we create an income stream that's going to support those, visions and goals that you have. And it can be from anywhere, right? It could be maybe part of that is from real estate. Maybe it's from your investment portfolio. Maybe it's dividends, right?
Maybe it's the business running without you.
Exactly, exactly. And many law firm owners, that's where they want to get to, right? They don't have these traditional notions of retirement necessarily. Maybe you're going to retain some ownership in your practice and, negotiate a percentage of profit or a percentage of revenue being paid to you over a period of time or something like that.
I love it. So excuse me, you mentioned psychology of money. I love he's got that line I'm going to paraphrase that's like, if you were always told to just invest in a dividend index fund, like you might do that after reading this book, but at least you understand why. Like
Hmm.
what you're saying, everybody's answer is going to be different, but going through the process and working with somebody like Darren and really figuring out your answer, not somebody else's answer, not the answer somebody is financially incentivized to sell you, like figuring that out is where I think you find true happiness.
Yes, yeah. Right. Because it's so easy to think that certain things will make you happy because it's what everybody else wants, but it may not be what really truly brings you joy. So you got to think about what really moves the needle for you in terms of your own personal joy, and you'll be surprised what you find there. It may not be the traditional things that everybody else wants. It might be something very different. Um, maybe you do want to travel, maybe you don't, right? It's different for everybody. You've got to figure out what it is for you.
So, anything you want to make sure we cover as we get towards the end that we did not talk about?
No, I mean, this has been a great conversation. I would challenge the listeners just to, spend some time contemplating, your goals for the future and where you are right now, right? And what changes could you make to dramatically increase your happiness, right? Um, not everybody wants to have the $10 million law firm necessarily. There's a lot of stress and risk that comes along with that.
Right.
Right? So, it starts at the foundation, understanding what really makes you happy, and then building the law firm that supports that, building the financial plan that supports that, and designing your life around those concepts. And bringing your family into the conversation. I think that's really, really critical, right? Your kids, right? How are we teaching our kids to think about money and think about wealth and be successful in their lives because the schools aren't doing it, right? We need to be, as parents, helping our kids understand, what is money all about? What is wealth all about? And how do we be responsible with it? How do we make sure we are aligning our wealth with our mission?
Love it. All right. So, for anybody who's been listening for, I don't know, 50 minutes, smart enough to want to hear more from you, get more of these insights, go deeper on any of this stuff with you, what's the best way for them to get in touch?
Yeah, so it's really simple. Just go to lawyermillionaire.com, and there you can learn all about everything that we do. We've got the podcast, the book, all kinds of resources there. So, yeah, check it out, lawyermillionaire.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being with us, Darren. Thank you to everybody who watched and listened. That being said, thank you so much, Darren.
Thank you, Jordan. Great to be with you.